You're listening to Cars and Coffee, your local home for the latest in motorsports and automotive news here on 91.3 WHJE. And now, here's your host, Nathan Ward. Hello, and welcome back to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE. My name is Nathan Ward. I hope everyone listening had a wonderful spring break. We are coming out of the INDYCAR weekend on the streets of Long Beach, and there were a couple things that caught my eye. One is the really sad TV rating, and the other is the fact that all of these opening races are often scheduled against very, very tough competition on TV. Coming out of the third race of the year, it had been 3 weeks since the previous race at the Thermal Club, and it will be another 3 weeks until the next race at Barber Motorsports Park. This just has to change. This isn't good for audience retention, and we've seen it go from, we've had 1.4 million viewers at St. Pete, down to 700,000 at Thermal, and now 500,000 at Long Beach. This isn't good for retaining fans, and also scheduling INDYCAR against other sporting events that you will not beat in terms of ratings is not a great idea either. I know it was Fox that just kind of had to fit them in somewhere on network, but still, that's something you have to fix at some point. The Grand Prix of Long Beach, while having a record crowd of about 200,000 people, that's a great positive coming out of the weekend, only had around 500,000 TV viewers. Now, from last year, the bar in terms of TV viewers was not high. Long Beach only got around 300,000 viewers on cable, which that was probably the death blow for that race, was the fact that they put it on USA, and USA is only really known for Law and Order reruns. This was down from the 700,000 viewers from the Thermal Club race and the record 1.4 million for St. Pete. The Thermal and Long Beach races also both clashed with NASCAR. Thermal clashed with NASCAR directly, i.e. the entire Thermal race took place during the NASCAR Cup race at Homestead Miami Speedway, and Thermal also clashed with the second round of March Madness. NASCAR saw a decrease in ratings from that, mainly because people were watching March Madness, and I think a lot of the younger fans that tuned in at St. Pete were paying more attention to March Madness than a boring IndyCar race at the Thermal Club. For Long Beach, the event that overshadowed most other sports that weekend was the Masters, which had a record darn near 13 million viewers. And for a golf tournament, was actually quite entertaining. As someone who doesn't watch golf myself and watched the end of the Masters, it was pretty cool. This hurt IndyCar, especially due to its substantially smaller young audience and a majority of its casual audience still being older men. The 3-week gaps between races, along with most of those races clashing with major events, create a product that's hard to follow, and the lack of good road course racing since the introduction of the hybrid unit only adds fuel to the dumpster fire. The prospect of adding races in downtown Arlington, or not downtown Arlington, but around AT&T Stadium, and a race in Mexico City next year in the early part of the season brings a little bit of hope that the sluggish start that we've gotten used to in these last couple years can be alleviated. But with that small bit of promise, I actually put together what I think the 2026 IndyCar schedule is going to look like. And there are a few things that are going to not go IndyCar's way next year. There's the Winter Olympics at the very beginning of the year. The earliest you can start usually is March 1st, which is where I have the opener at St. Pete, especially considering Arlington is 2 weeks later. There's also the World Cup over the summer that's going to take out a majority of weekends for IndyCar because Fox is going to be airing World Cup matches, and World Cup is obviously a very hot commodity around the rest of the world, and not just here, but soccer is exploding in popularity here in the U.S. So the early part of my proposed 2026 schedule is what I think is the most important. You have St. Pete on March 1st, which is probably what it's going to be now that they've announced that Arlington is going to be on March 15th. Perfect. 2-week gap, or one off week between St. Pete and Arlington. That's great. Great start. That's not too damaging to the teams. Teams can still have a rest week and then go to Texas. There's still a month between Arlington and Mexico City. I will talk about why I left a month between Arlington and Mexico City a little bit later in the show. But Mexico City's proposed date, according to the Associated Press, was going to be April 12th, 2026. Then a week later is when Long Beach is definitely going to happen. There will be no clashes with March Madness in this schedule, at least so far, and there will be no clashes with the Masters next year, because the Masters is the first full week of April next year. It looks like Barber's going to be on May 3rd. Now that I think is Long Beach off week Barber. That's fine. Again, give the team some rest, and then immediately afterward, go to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course, which is basically an off week for most teams since they're based in the Indianapolis area. Jump into the month of May, and then Memorial Day, you have the Indy 500, which caps off that early season swing for the teams. Now, the rest of the summer stretch that I had to work around with the World Cup here, Gateway is most likely going to be June 6th. Or no, Detroit is the week after the 500. I don't think that changes. Then we have Gateway on June 6th. I think Gateway is the second race, second race after Indy this year. I think they'll keep it in the same spot because they want an oval in the summer. June 28th, the World Cup begins the weekend after Gateway. So you have a race in the middle of the World Cup. Just take the hit because you got to get the race in, but it's at Road America. Road America, this is basically where Road America's date is this year. So I didn't really move races around. I just tried to schedule where I could fit holes in the World Cup schedule. Then skip ahead to, I put Mid-Ohio on July 12th. I don't like not having an INDYCAR race on July 4th weekend, but I think because of the World Cup, you're going to have to not have an INDYCAR race on July 4th weekend next year. On the schedule, I've cut Iowa down to one race on July 18th, Saturday night. That way it doesn't conflict with the World Cup final that is the next day. There is another option that I have there that you could have it in the morning, like last year's Sunday morning race, and have it lead into the World Cup final that's going to happen in New Jersey. But you don't want to risk that for fans because it's going to be hot. So I don't know. With Iowa, it's what do you put first? Do you put first the TV ratings or the fans? I think you can put both first by having it on Saturday night. That way the fans are cool and the TV, there's no real TV clash. July 26th is Toronto. That is, Toronto is way later than it is. Not way later, but maybe a couple weeks later. Because Toronto is going to be hosting World Cup games right next to where the INDYCAR track is. So there is going to be a section where you cannot schedule Toronto for a large chunk of the summer next year. And I think they're going to go late July with Toronto. August 2nd is where I put Laguna Seca. I usually put that second stretch of West Coast races towards the end of the year. The week after, I have a spot that I have marked as Portland, but Portland's future is a little bit in question, so that could be a slot that is taken out and replaced with an off week if you get a contract extension done with Thermal, and you can put Thermal in between Arlington and Mexico City. Or if Sao Paulo, Brazil, at the F1 track, if that somehow becomes an option, put that there instead. Then the season rounds out here. I put Milwaukee on August 23rd and Nashville on Labor Day weekend. I think August 30th is Labor Day. No, Labor Day weekend might be the next, but in order to not conflict with the NFL, I put Nashville right at the end of August, like it is this year. So that's my proposed 2026 IndyCar schedule. The World Cup is going to make things difficult like the Olympics did last year, but instead of just not having a race, I would put races where there's not games on, because unlike the Olympics, there's going to be a break in World Cup action where you might be able to fit in an IndyCar race. It just depends. But the venues with unknown status going into next year are really just Mexico City, because They have a proposed date for the race, but nothing has been agreed to on paper that we know of. And knowing my timing on this show, that's probably going to change right after I get off air here. So, Portland. Portland is kind of in doubt now because it's not drawing good crowds. The racing isn't good, and there are more pressing venues that need a spot on the calendar, like Mexico City. To fit tracks like Arlington and Mexico City on the calendar, I dropped Thermal and I dropped the second Iowa race. Iowa is not big enough of an event to warrant 2 races anymore. Unfortunately, I don't like that I have to drop an oval race, but I kind of have to. So you win some, you lose some. But with Thermal, I see Thermal as an absolute last resort. If you need a race, if you lose Portland, or if you unfortunately lose Iowa after this year, put Thermal in between Arlington and Mexico City and bridge that gap a little bit. Now, in a perfect world, that slot between Arlington and Mexico City, the first week of April or the last weekend of March, yeah, that's March Madness, yeah, that's the Masters, but you could put Sao Paulo there. I think Sao Paulo, even if not getting a good TV rating, could make that up in fan interest on the ground in Brazil. But those are my thoughts on how IndyCar can fix the massive gaps that it has in the beginning of its schedule, something that is not really good for viewer retention. If you are enjoying listening to this show, make sure to follow us over on our Instagram at carsandcoffee_WHJE and follow the station while you're at it at WHJE_radio. You can find live show replays on YouTube anywhere at youtube.com/TWIRvids, and you can listen live anywhere in the world at WHJE.com. We're going to take a quick break here on Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE. When we come back, Penske is debating giving IndyCar team owners car payments. More on that later. Here's Savior by Rise Against. Don't go anywhere. Cars and Coffee will be right back here on 91.3 WHJE. Hi. If you're listening to this, that means you're listening to the show on playback. I just want to say thank you for listening, and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss full-length show replays when they're uploaded. If you're listening on playback on the radio, go to youtube.com/TWIRvids. If you're listening to the video on YouTube, just click the button below. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. We now return to Cars and Coffee on 91.3 WHJE. Hello and welcome back to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE. My name is Nathan Ward. That was Savior by Rise Against. Before we get started with this second segment of the show, a reminder to follow us on our Instagram at carsandcoffee_WHJE. Let's get into it. IndyCar teams are bracing for higher costs when Dallara introduces the long-awaited successor to the DW12 IndyCar chassis. With some teams strapped for cash, Penske Entertainment has been reportedly considering a finance plan for the new chassis come 2027. The goal of bringing the new chassis to market as early as 2027 means IndyCar teams would need to place deposits for multiple cars in 2026 and pay the remainder of the balance before receiving the cars in around 18 months. With yearly budgets reaching near $10 million for teams, some won't be able to handle the parallel costs to compete in the IndyCar series while paying for a technological changeover in the same season. Racer.com, which is one of my best sources when I'm finding stuff to talk about here on this show, they learned over the last couple weeks that this proposed new financial structure, Penske would shoulder these new car costs for those who are interested and spread the reimbursement over multiple years to alleviate some of the financial burden placed on some of these smaller teams by changing all of this technology. If the idea becomes a reality, team owners would enter into a loan and repayment agreement with the series owner. The ideas are still in very early stages they're basically still in the brainstorming phase. When it comes to discussing it with teams, there's a question of whether the offer would only extend to the 10 teams that own charters, or if it would still cover non-charter entrants and non-full-time entries like Prema, which is full-time, but they don't own charters, Dreyer and Reinbold Cusick, and Able Motorsports that only run the Indy 500 or select races a year. Dreyer and Reinbold especially wants to come back full season if the new car proves to be financially viable for them. The Penske Entertainment CEO, Mark Miles, a guy that I bag on quite often on this show, says that if the payment system were to happen, it would involve direct dealings with Penske rather than engaging a bank to arrange loans for teams on behalf of the series. There are at least 2 teams, according to the article, Ed Carpenter Racing and Dale Coyne Racing, that have confirmed their interest in the plan. Now, I like this as a series that is becoming increasingly costly, not because of just general inflation, but also the current economic state of the world. This, I think, is a good idea. Just give the teams a car payment. Now, I toured Chip Ganassi last year when they had 5 cars. They had the 5 cars, and they had 1 parts mule, and they had 2 backup cars for Palou and Dixon. That is a total, okay, so 5 cars, that is 8 cars, that is 8 chassis. They also had a Speedway chassis for what would become Kiffin Simpson's car. That's 9 chassis, plus spare parts and everything. So 8 fully built cars, 1 that's being used as a parts mule. That's a lot of chassis, but not every team's as big as Ganassi, and Ganassi's back down to 3 cars, so I'd imagine that number is now closer to 7 chassis that they are actively using or using parts from. Now, with a team like Dale Coyne, who don't have the financial luxury of the rest of the grid, this might be important because they will need a primary car, or a primary car for each of their drivers, which at this point for Coyne is 2 drivers. That might change by 2027. He might sell a charter. But he's going to need 2 primaries, and he's going to need 2 backups. That's 4 chassis. That's going to be a whole lot of money to spend in one go in the offseason of 2026. Even though that's a 6-month offseason, you're not making any money because you're not racing. So, I really like this idea. As odd as it sounds, I think this will help teams in the long run. And it won't, hopefully we won't go down to like 20 teams where we were pre-COVID, where we only had, 21 full-time cars throughout the season, and then a couple of stragglers at the back that bring the field up to 24 occasionally. Hopefully we don't go back to that. Hopefully all the teams are able to stay financially stable enough to transition to the new car, whatever the new car may look like. We still don't really know what the engine plan is going to be like for these new cars, which is something that I think they should really get on if they really want to keep Honda around, because Honda really wants to leave, and if they are completely unsure until the last second of what the new engine formula is going to be, they're going to want out, because they don't want to have, less than a year to build an engine, unless they don't want to have that little amount of time to build an engine. They want to have maybe 2 years. We are past the 2-year threshold. They need to get on this now. This car is, if they don't get this now, they're gonna be forced to delay this another year. And I don't think that's something that teams are going to tolerate, and that really doesn't seem like something that Roger Penske himself is willing to tolerate. So, as the new car formula kind of takes shape, these ideas get thrown out there, and the car payments for teams idea is one of the smarter ones, one of the more smart new car ideas that I have heard so far. Good on you, INDYCAR, for at least catering to the less financially privileged of the teams, such as a team like Dale Coyne Racing, which I think is really the only team that is like truly they aren't backed by a major company, because even Even Ed Carpenter has major sponsorship or support now from the guy that owns Java House. I forget his name. And Prema is Prema. They make more money for themselves elsewhere that they can just throw money in an IndyCar program for fun. I like this. This is overwhelmingly positive for me. So I want to see the DW12 gone. I want to see it retired. That car has run its course. It will be 15 years old by the time it retires. And I think if this does get delayed another year, I will have gone through my entire life in grade school with the DW12 as the IndyCar chassis. It started in 2012. I started kindergarten in 2014, I think. I don't know. I feel old. 2014 to 2027. Yeah, that's a long time for a car to be in service. Yeah, the NASCAR Xfinity car is 15 years old, but that car produces good racing, and that's something that I need what I believe will be called the IR27 to fix. They need to implement the hybrid system in a way that's actually going to not ruin the racing. So those are all my thoughts on the car payments for teams rumor that was put out by Racer a couple weeks ago. You're listening to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJ. We're going to take a quick break. Here is If I Had Eyes by Jack Johnson. Don't go anywhere. Cars and Coffee will be right back here on 91.3 WHJE. Hi. If you're listening to this, that means you're listening to the show on playback. I just want to say thank you for listening, and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss full-length show replays when they're uploaded. If you're listening on playback on the radio, go to youtube.com/TWIRvids. If you're listening to the video on YouTube, just click the button below. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. We now return to Cars and Coffee on 91.3 WHJE. Hello and welcome back to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE. My name is Nathan Ward, and before we head off and the first and 10 guys come in here, we're going to make some picks and talk about the races this week. There are only 3 series racing this week. The World Endurance Championship is at Imola for the 6 hours of Imola. That will be, for our time, that will be Sunday at 7 a.m., and you can find the entire race on HBO Max. The NASCAR Xfinity and Truck Series will both be making their return to Rockingham Speedway for the first time in over 10 years. The Truck Series will be racing the Black's Tire 200. That will be Friday night at 5 p.m. on FS1. The Xfinity Series will be racing in the North Carolina Education Lottery 250. That will be Saturday, April 19th at 4 p.m. on the CW. Real quick picks here before I get out of here. For WEC, I'm not really that familiar. This is the first time I picked for WEC because I actually did my last show when a WEC race was going on during the Qatar 1812, so I didn't get a chance to pick. So I'm going very generic here. I think the number 5 Porsche Penske Motorsports car is going to win in Hypercar. I think these guys are going to keep being dominant everywhere in top-level sports cars. And for LMGT3, I picked the Qatar winners, TF Sport. I really don't know who else to do here. So for trucks, I think Corey Heim's going to continue his domination in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series at Rockingham. And for Xfinity, I really didn't know who to pick, so I'm going to throw my support behind Jesse Love for this weekend. Those are my picks. Please make sure to follow the show on Instagram at carsandcoffee_WHJE. Thank you for listening to today's show. My name is Nathan Ward. Here's Higher by Creed.